You're watching HuffPost Live. I'm Caitlin Becker. Are you an emotional eater? Sure, we've all probably found comfort in food at some point, but what happens when you seek it out on a more regular basis? Binge eating is the most common eating disorder in America, with more than 7 million people struggling with it in the United States. But where does the desire to consume large quantities of food come from, and what can those suffering do to curb their behavior? Joining us to discuss why people binge and how to help stop the habit, we have on set Jenny Kramer, the founder and executive director of Metro Behavioral, and the co-author of Overcoming Binge Eating for Dummies, and Marjorie Nolan Cohn, the founder of MNC Nutrition LLC, and the co-author of Overcoming Binge Eating for Dummies. And in our Google Hangout is Ken Stewart, a licensed massage therapist and binge eater. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Now, just to sort of set the stage for this, everyone has overeaten at some point, and people kind of overeat all the time. And what is the difference between just general overeating and binge eating?
Well, it's a great first question because you're right, everyone has overeaten. So let's make three little categories here. We'll say there's emotional eating, compulsive overeating, and binge eating. In emotional eating, you feel bad, something awful happened, you eat in response to it, you kind of know you're doing it, it's an isolated event, maybe it happens repeatedly. Compulsive overeating is more like grazing all through the day, no sense of portion control. Binge eating is a much more serious version of all of that because it's much more food consumed in a discrete period of time and to the point of physical illness, and it can happen more than once a day, more than once a week, but it's a very, very massive quantity of food.
And can you just sort of quantify what exactly is a massive quantity of food?
Well, let's say thousands of calories, several days worth of calories within a 20, 30, 60, 90-minute period.
And when we're talking about binge eating as an eating disorder, how often do you have to binge? How many calories you have to consume for it to be considered that disorder and not maybe an isolated incident?
Well, the current criteria for binge eating disorder is binging on what's considered a larger amount of food than normal in a certain time period. So there's no hard and fast rules, but it's something that happens compulsively 3 or more times a week over a 3-month period. As practitioners who work in the field, and Jenny had mentioned, there are many versions of binge eating disorder, and so what makes it serious or life-altering for one person may be different for another. So we really have to look at it in diagnosing for each individual.
Now, Ken, for you personally, can you talk to me about your experience with binge eating? At what point did you realize you had a problem?
Well, it's really just been in the past year. I am an alcoholic, and when I went into recovery a few years ago, I was told, go ahead and have a little bit of sugar, some chocolate, something like that to take the edge off, because there's a lot of physical changes you go through. That went from a little piece of candy to candy bars, cakes, cookies, ice cream, and now it's just gotten to the point where it's every single day. And it's a lot. It'll be like a pint of ice cream and a half a cake after work every day.
And is that what your day-to-day life is like, constantly? It would sound reasonable to, if you know that those are your triggers, not have them in the house. But why is it so hard to resist this on a daily basis?
I don't know. I feel like I'm under a lot of stress or something, or I've been working hard to really make a lot of changes in my life, and sometimes I feel entitled to have something. I get nervous sometimes, even when I think about taking the subway home without a couple of candy bars in my bag to get from point A to point B.
Now, is Ken's situation, that doesn't sound all that uncommon to me. I know a lot of people who, do feel that sense of entitlement. You had a great day, you get to have a reward, you get to eat cake, you get to eat cookies, and then it can snowball into something bigger. And then on the flip side, like he mentioned, you're anxious, you have stress, so you want to eat, you want a snack to sort of make yourself feel better. Is this a common way to start binge eating?
Yes. And Ken's very brave to talk about this, and it's really, context is everything. If you're doing this because you just cannot tolerate feelings, being with yourself, being just in the moment without something to do or chew, That's going to bring about the symptoms more than anything else. Also, you made a very common comment, which is, can't you just not have it in the house? Well, if only, then we'd be selling shoes for a living or something. But it's more than that. Binging often takes place in secret places. So it could be in the car. It can be on the train, on the way home. Most of the eating takes place not in the kitchen. It can. It can be in the bedroom. It's a very secretive behavior.
Ken, I'd love to get you to weigh in on this. Is this something that you try to hide?
I'm feeling very emotional right now. I'm very ashamed of this. I do hide it. I work at a health facility. I have a trainer. I was just told yesterday I don't look like a binge eater. I feel horrible about it. I hide it. I do. I just started talking about it in the last couple of weeks.
I understand the shame and the stigma that gets attached to that, and I thank you for coming on to talk about this, because so many people do struggle with it and are afraid to be honest. Like you said, they do it in hiding. I know that I've done it myself before. Even when I'm about to have dinner or about to go have snacks, if I had a bad day, I'll go in the kitchen and I'll stuff myself full of whatever I can, standing up, because I'm standing up and I'm not sitting down and enjoying it, and then go in the other room and have dinner. And it's that thing, well, if no one sees me do it, it's kind of like it didn't happen.
One of the things that had Marjorie and I write this book was really because there is so much shame, and so it was to take people out of the closet a little bit, but also it so happens that there's now an official diagnosis that's called binge eating disorder. You would have thought it existed long before, but it didn't. And what we're hoping is that over time, it's going to relieve some of the stigma. No, this is not a matter of somebody being lazy, or it's willpower, or they just, they can't control themselves. If only. It's not that. It's really a bona fide eating disorder, just like anorexia, just like bulimia, just like everything along the continuum.
It's a very unhealthy relationship with food, just like anorexia or bulimia. And Ken, I'm curious, do you enjoy food? Because I love food. I love sitting down and having dinner with friends, but when I found myself binging, I don't even enjoy what I'm eating. I just need to go through the motions. Is it similar like that with you?
Well, I love food. I like to cook. I worked in the restaurant industry for years. I did it because I liked it. Mine's really kind of more about sugar and stuff like that than anything else. And yeah, I will eat, like, I'm going to the movies, let's say. I will go and buy 6, 7 king-size candy bars. I will eat them as fast as I can, even though I'm starting to feel almost sick before even the opening credits of the movie are done. And then I'll go out and buy some more candy. And I'm sitting by myself, I don't want anybody to see me. I can't get it in me fast enough.
What is this kind of behavior doing to the body? I think Ken said something so fascinating, that someone had told him, you don't look like a binge eater, because as a society, we equate binging and overeating with a high weight, and that being unhealthy, but necessarily your weight and your health aren't always in line. So what is this kind of behavior doing to the inside?
Well, there's a lot of things that are happening internally, and one of the things I really want to point out, especially in reference to what Ken was mentioning in sugar, is that there's a true physical sort of addictive quality to binging. And what's happening in your body on a hormonal level is releasing serotonin. Food makes us feel better. And the physical perpetuates the emotional, which perpetuates the physical. And so, as Jenny had mentioned, it's definitely not all in our head, and it's not all an emotional experience. There's a true physical experience that happens with binging, and whether or not you need food or you need calories, that what happens is a true physical hunger is sort of ignited as part of that binge experience. And the hormones and serotonin and things that are happening in our brain, in particularly the reward pathway, kind of perpetuate the experience.
We have a comment here from Judy David, someone in our community, who says, I sometimes have wished I could purge after binge eating, but I figure that's not a good solution. I don't know what is, though. with binge eating so often comes purging, and then you sort of could spiral into the potential of getting into bulimia. So what do you do when you're in a position where you found that you've just binged on, for Ken, his triggers are sugars. For me, I love salt. And you've done it and it's over with. What do you do then?
Well, there's a lot of work to do before that point, but when you're at that point, we do not recommend purging at all. And that is bulimia, and it's actually harder to undo than just binge behaviors. One of the best things to do right away is to simply change the environment you're in. Even if you feel terribly uncomfortable, keep it safe, don't go out in the street in the middle of the night, but change the environment you're in, change the activity you're doing, get out of the room that you're in, because literally your brain will make a switch. So if you're in your home and you've just binged, so go into a different room and literally start some activity that will just distract you. It has to be something you would naturally do, something that you enjoy doing. Maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's just reading, maybe it's just deep breathing. To just allow yourself to be forgiven for what you've just done. Just forgive yourself, because the more that you are upset with yourself, the more you're going to binge. So really, the first order when you've actually done this is to go to another room or another activity, or just literally step outside if you can. Take a walk if you can do that. Now, be careful here, because you don't want to just do compensatory behaviors. Okay, now I just binged, so now I'm going to run 7 miles. Well, A, if you don't normally do that, I wouldn't do it. And B, I certainly wouldn't do it after what's a bona fide binge.
You mentioned a minute ago that these are the things you can do really after you found yourself binging.
Yes.
What are the steps people should be taking ahead of time before they get to this point to help someone in Ken's position to really break free of this sort of emotional burden that they have?
One, first and foremost, be kind and gentle to yourself. And realize that no, you're not some sloth, you're not lazy. This is an eating disorder. And realize, number two, that the key to recovery is not going to be in going on a diet. Yes, eventually you want your food intake to be regulated. That would be great. But the diet industry depends on you wanting to go on a diet. That's not the fix. That's only going to make you feel more restricted, and so then you'll overcompensate. The next thing to do is to seek help. And there's lots of different ways to do that.
It says Command Shift 3 to stop recording, but I did that the last time and it didn't.
Well, that's great, because if you can see an eating disorder-related psychotherapist and a nutritionist, dietitian, you need both of those components together. If you're not in an area where those are so evident, get yourself to an Overeaters Anonymous meeting. They're very kind and gentle meetings. They're not for everybody, but it's at least a place to just listen. It's a place to say, you know what, there are other people just like me. I'm not a pariah. I'm not alone. I can get some help here. There's many, many different ways to do that. Yeah.
For, first step, what would you think is the very first thing, if you think you have a problem with binge eating, you should do? Because we talked about a lot of different solutions, but listening to that can seem overwhelming to people who struggle. So what would you recommend the very first thing someone should do if they're struggling?
Well, one of the first things that you can do is see your medical doctor, just see your primary care physician, simply because most people do have a primary care physician, and if you have insurance, it's probably going to be covered. And that most primary care physicians can refer you to a psychotherapist and or look on your insurance panel to see if there are any therapists in your area that do take your insurance that you can at least talk to as a starting point. Knowing that not everyone specializes in eating disorders, but if you seek out someone with that credential, they should be able to help you, point you in the right direction. Also, working with a registered dietitian. There are a lot of techniques that I use with clients where just to offset a binge, to find distractions, to use healthier versions of foods as a way to take the edge off the binge without binging. One of the things that happen with binging is people get into the mindset of, oh, well, I already messed up today, so I might as well keep going.
Mm-hmm.
When we can really plan certain foods as an alternative so that people can sort of not get into that mindset.
I think these are all great tips to start on, but we have so many more below in our resource wall. Ken, thank you so much for being just so brave and talking about this. I know that it is so emotional and difficult to talk about in the open, and we really, really appreciate you doing that. We might have lost Ken, but Jenny and Marjorie, thank you guys so much for coming on and talking to us. Make sure that you check out more information on the book, Overcoming Binge Eating for Dummies, and how to get help. The links are below in our resource wall, so check those out. This is HuffPost Live, where the conversation always continues.